Let her rip. Let her roll, right?
Good morning. I call this hearing to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. I would like to begin by noting some important requirements. Let me begin by saying that standing House and committee rules and practice will continue to apply during hybrid proceedings. All members are reminded that they are expected to adhere to these standing rules, including decorum. House regulations require members to be visible through a video connection throughout the proceedings, so please keep your cameras on. Also, remember to remain muted until you're recognized to minimize background noise. If you have to participate in another proceeding, please exit this one and log back in later. In the event a member encounters technical issues that prevent them from being recognized for their questioning, I will move to the next available member of the same party, and will recognize that member at the next appropriate time slot, provided they have returned to the proceeding. For those members and staff physically present in the committee room today, in accordance with the attendance physician's most recent guidance, all members and staff who attend this hybrid hearing in person will be required to wear masks in the hearing room. Furthermore, all members and staff who have not been fully vaccinated must also maintain 6-foot social distancing from others. With that said, members will be allowed to briefly remove their mask if they have been recognized to speak. With that, let me start my opening statement. Since the 1980s, America has largely been mired in a slump when it comes to new business formation. This fact rarely generates headlines or garners attention in the media, but its implications are severe. New businesses make up the foundation of our economy. The entrepreneurs that launch enterprises and products are the catalysts for American innovation. The statistics paint a startling picture of the state of our country's entrepreneurial environment over the past 4 decades. In 1980, 12% of employers were new businesses. By 2018, this figure had dropped to 8%. In 1982, 38% of all businesses were new firms, compared to just 29% in 2018. In 2018, larger corporations were doing quite well, but small firms were exiting the market at a higher rate than they were being started. This was the state of American startups in March of 2020, when the pandemic began to intensify. As COVID spread and businesses closed, our country was staring down an unprecedented economic crisis. Using the Great Recession and its aftermath as a guide, experts predicted that the pandemic will continue to drop the rate of business startups to new lows. But despite the dire forecast, American entrepreneurship didn't crater during the pandemic. It flourished. In 2020, Americans filed paperwork to start 4.3 million new businesses. This figure represents a 24% increase from 2019 and by far the highest number over the past 15 years. Many of these businesses didn't look like traditional small firms. As the pandemic drove commerce online, these new enterprises were primarily concentrated in the non-store online retail sector. The entrepreneurs starting these new businesses also reflected the diversity of the American population in the 21st century. Black and Hispanic communities lead the way in launching new companies. Young entrepreneurs dealt with a tough job market by pivoting towards entrepreneurship to develop businesses and products to serve their communities. No one factor fully accounts for this entrepreneurship boom. Layoffs, favorable credit markets, and federal stimulus efforts all help lay the groundwork for this record rise in new businesses. So today, I hope that this hearing allows us to better understand this entrepreneurial revival and apply those lessons moving forward. The pandemic disrupted many areas of American life, not least of which being the nature of work. The challenges facing this new generation of entrepreneurs aren't identical to the problems of the pre-pandemic economy. We must work to understand these new challenges and find ways Congress can better support them in the post-pandemic world. It is also vital that we grasp why entrepreneurship flourished during COVID and what can we do to sustain that increase in the future. COVID closed countless small businesses and left many others on the brink of disaster. Yet at the same time, it is possible the pandemic set in motion a revitalization of American entrepreneurship. Today, I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about the journey that led them to start a business and how this committee can support them and others like them in the future. I now would like to yield to the ranking member, Mr. Luckemeyer, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning. We meet today for a hearing on entrepreneurship in the new economy. Regrettably, as we've all witnessed over the past year, the outlook for our nation's entrepreneurs is dismal. Small business owners, entrepreneurs, and startups are known to be resilient and skillful, easily adapting to changing conditions. They are fast and can adjust to meet the needs of their customers. They can pivot with speed and capture market share. These small business attributes, along with vigilant risk-taking and investing, are key ingredients to a growing economy. But the COVID pandemic, coupled with Biden and the Democrats' failed economic policies, have brought severe economic challenges to Main Street USA. Entrepreneurs across the country, from both coasts to the middle of the country, face incredible obstacles. This fall, economic growth ground to a halt as all businesses confronted by severe supply chain disruptions, ongoing labor shortages, skyrocketing inflation, higher costs of nearly everything, and threats of tax increases from the Democrats. To follow an overreaching vaccine mandate has been proposed with very limited information. Small business owners and the entrepreneurs require clear and concise rules and information to make business decisions. Uncertainty can't be part of their business model. Unknown next steps bring their planning to a complete halt. With each of these issues coming to the forefront, let's review them. We can begin with supply chain disruptions and higher costs. Small businesses which operate on thin margins have been shocked by recent supply chain failures. An FIB September Economic Trends Survey found 90% of small businesses have been affected by these disruptions, and nearly half of all small businesses have experienced product delays from their suppliers. With empty shelves continuing to be a common sight in our local communities, the fourth quarter and the holiday season could be a rough stretch for the nation's job creators. At the same time, demand for goods has increased, pushing prices even higher. Labor. Across all industries, labor shortages have hindered the ability of companies to get products made, shipped, unpacked, and transported. Once the products and goods have arrived, the businesses often do not have a full staff ready to meet and greet customers. Biden administration's worker shortage means that employers now have 10.4 million job openings. Let me repeat that, 10.4 million job openings and no one willing to fill them. NFIB found 51% of small businesses have unfilled job openings, a staggering and record number. In addition, employers are facing record numbers of workers quitting their jobs, and according to the Federal Reserve, the pandemic has resulted in a record 3 million early retirements. This is a dreadful situation as we head into what should be the busiest time of the year for businesses, the holiday season. Inflation. Despite the Biden administration's denials, it is very clear that inflation is no longer temporary or transitory. In October, the Department of Labor reported that the Consumer Price Index, one trusted measure of inflation, is now at a 13-year high of 5.4%. Even the Federal Reserve's chairman, who has insisted for months that inflation is transitory, recently admitted that inflation is expected to remain high well into next year. Overall, inflation means higher prices for small businesses along with higher prices for their customers. Tax increases. Could there be a worse time to threaten entrepreneurs and small firms with tax increases? In February, President Biden said the U.S. had lost more than 400,000 businesses since the pandemic began, and many more were at risk. Yet the Biden administration and congressional Democrats have proposed a huge number of tax increases to fund their massive spending programs. We're not sure, however, which tax increases are still on the table although it seems to be changing by the minute. But surely the last thing small businesses need coming out of a pandemic are tax increases. Employer vaccine mandates. In September, President Biden announced that his administration is developing a regulation that will require all private sector employers employed by a business with 100 or more employees to be vaccinated or submit to weekly testing. According to the Society of Human Resource Management, 89% of employers fear at least some of their employees will quit as a result. The uncertainty surrounding these rules is putting the brakes on small businesses as they try to get back on their feet and serve their communities. A labor shortage crisis accompanied by an employer vaccine mandate are a grave threat to American small business prosperity. How much more can small businesses withstand? Taken alone, each of these policies is devastating, but taken together, their impact is likely to have serious, long-term consequences for entrepreneurship. Madam Chairwoman, we should be enacting policies that will empower entrepreneurs. Attentive risk-taking and investing are what will grow our economy. However, entrepreneurs are facing an economic storm that is preventing this progress. I appreciate our witnesses being with us today. I look forward to the testimony. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Lukemeyer. The gentleman yields back. I would like to take a moment to explain how this hearing will proceed. Each witness will have 5 minutes to provide a statement, and each committee member will have 5 minutes for questions. Please ensure that your mic is on when you begin speaking and that you return to mute when finished. With that, I would like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness today is Ms. Ellie Diop, CEO of Ellie Talks Money. Ms. Diop was laid off from her corporate job months before the pandemic. After submitting over 50 job applications, Ms. Diop capitalized on her $1,200 stimulus check and entrepreneurial spirit to create her business. Ellie Talks Money is an online coaching and consulting service for aspiring and unestablished business owners that was able to build a net worth of over $1 million in less than 1 year. Welcome, Ms. Diop. I would like to yield to Ms. Newman to introduce our second witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member. I am proud to introduce Mr. Andrew Fogerty, a resident of the great state of Illinois and from my district. He currently serves as both the director of the Illinois Small Business Development Center at the Greater Southwest Development Corporation and as executive director of the 36 Squared Business Incubator, both in Chicago. In addition, he serves as a mentor with the Gallery Incubator in Evanston, Illinois. For over 12 years, Andrew has led local economic development initiatives, helped launch nearly 70 companies, served as an advisor to more than 300 others, and facilitated more than $40 million in funding for his clients. In 2017, he founded an all-abilities business incubator in the 36 Squared building on the Chicago Southwest side and was selected as the 2020 State Star by the Illinois Small Business Development Center Network. I just have to tell you on a personal note that Andrew's quite amazing, and we're so proud to have him in our district. But it is a pleasure to welcome Mr. Fogerty to speak today. Thank you, Chairwoman. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. Our third witness is Ms. Stephanie Devon, the Vice President of Entrepreneurship and Business Development at the National Urban League. The National Urban League is a historic civil rights organization dedicated to economic empowerment of historically underserved urban communities. As the Vice President of Entrepreneurship and Business Development, Ms. Devon manages, oversees, and advocates on behalf of 12 entrepreneurship centers located in key affiliates. In this capacity, her division supports these affiliates' small business programs through capacity building and programming sub-grants and by providing them with training and technical assistance. Welcome, Ms. Devon. I would now like to yield to the ranking member, Mr. Lukemeyer, to introduce our final witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Our next witness is Raymond J. Keating. Mr. Keating is the Chief Economist with the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council, or SBE. He writes and speaks on a wide range of issues impacting the entrepreneurship sector of the economy. His areas of expertise include taxation, monetary policy, federal, state, and local budgets, regulation, and economics. He's written hundreds of articles with pieces published in the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Boston Globe, Chicago Tribune, and Investors Business Daily. Mr. Keating holds a MA in economics from New York University and an MBA in banking and finance from Hofstra University, and a BS in business administration and economics from St. Joseph's College. I want to thank all the witnesses for joining us today. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Lukemeyer, and thank you all for being here today. Ms. Diop, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the Small Business Committee.
Michael.
Yes. Let's go closer. Okay. Oop. Is this better? Oh, there we go. Sounds a lot better. Good morning, members of the Small Business Committee. I'm very grateful to be here. My name is Ellie Diop, and I am CEO and founder of Ellie Diop Consulting Services, also known as Ellie Talks Money. I have a business coaching and consulting company that I started in the pandemic. So my path and journey to entrepreneurship is not like many others. I am also a mother of 4, and as you mentioned in introducing me, I wanted to get another job after being laid off before the pandemic began, and I did apply feverishly to several jobs, over 53 in fact. And my experience is one in corporate America. I've served as director of sales for over 3 years, but I was not able to find employment. And so when the stimulus checks, when I knew that they were coming, I began to make a plan on starting a business with that small, what I was looking at as a capital investment. And I conducted market research and really analyzed what did other businesses need at this time? Where are businesses struggling, and I did this market research by leveraging social media. And so I came to the determination that other small businesses really needed assistance in sales, which is something I was very good at. They needed assistance in finding funding, something I also knew how to do. And so when I received the stimulus check, I put it to use and purchased things like a website, a domain, a new phone, a ring light, all things that I knew I would be able to use to build a brand and build a following online. And so with consistency, dedication, and posting content on social media about 3 to 5 times per day, in 10 months I was able to net $1.3 million. And that is sheerly by having the access to entrepreneurship. So I share with my clients all of the time, and as their coach, I'm giving them the tools and strategies that they need to scale their own businesses by leveraging what we have, which is the internet and social media. And because I started this with, $1,200, I'm always reminding them that you don't need a large sum of money or a large capital investment in order to make a lot of money in your business. It's just about utilizing the right strategies. It's about staying committed. It's about staying dedicated and leveraging what we have available to us. So now I'm very grateful that the business has grown and I've been able to employ myself 5 people. It's a very, amazing turn of events, being that it was so challenging for me to find a job. Now I'm in a position where I can actually create jobs. And my goal for 2022 is to increase our staff to 10, hopefully, and to continue from there. But definitely where the biggest success in this entire accomplishment truly is just that I've been able to show and inspire people, over 300,000 people, that if I can do this, so can you. There's a misconception that entrepreneurship or the ability to start a business is one that begins with a silver spoon in someone's mouth. But I think that my journey has been able to show people that regardless of where you're starting with, even as, a mother just coming out of a divorce, single mother trying to find a job, you can absolutely take the circumstance that you're given and completely change the narrative and change the scenario. So we live in a time where entrepreneurship is truly more accessible than ever. And given the right tools, small business owners can absolutely repeat what I have been able to do. Now, you don't need to have money to pay for advertising. You don't need to always have a lot of connections. You need to have grit. You need to have resilience. You need to have dedication and commitment to what product you want to sell. And now with platforms like social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all platforms that I've leveraged, you are able to go directly to your audience and make the sale. We don't have to go through all of these complicated channels, which actually gives small businesses a higher opportunity to thrive and survive than we may have had 4, 5, or 6 years ago. So I'm very grateful to be able to share my experience and my success in entrepreneurship with you all. And thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Diop, for that inspiring story. And I am just, it's really rewarding to know that there is a role for the federal government to play, particularly by empowering women like yourself. Now I will recognize Mr. Fogerty for 5 minutes. Mr. Fogerty, please unmute yourself. Yes. We cannot hear you, Mr. Fogerty. Mr. Fogerty, we're going to be working so that we could correct the technical issues. And now we will recognize Ms. DeBon. Ms. DeBon, please unmute yourself. So the problem is here. Okay. So we're going to take a brief recess until HRS address the issue.
Mr. Fogerty, if you can hear me, can you say something to see if this is working now?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. This is Mr. Fogerty?
Yes.
Okay, so
Can
we're
you hear
ready
me
to
now?
go. Let me,
Could we get the volume turned up a little bit in the hearing room, though, please?
it's working.
It is working? All right, we had them do a test. Can you hear them?
Yes.
Perfect. Let me go on and let them know.
You can hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. We're going to
Okay.
start. Give me 2 seconds, please.
Okay.
This hearing is called to order. Now we recognize Mr. Fogerty for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Chairwoman Velázquez and distinguished members of the committee. Again, my name is Andrew Fogerty. I'm with the 36 Squared Business Incubator in Chicago. I also oversee 2 of the Illinois Small Business Development Center locations, one at 36 Squared and one at the Greater Southwest Development Corporation. Both locations are also part of the City of Chicago's Neighborhood Business Development Center program. What this means is that myself and my colleagues, both across the city and the state, provide business assistance, training, and advising to area residents at no charge. I want to thank Congress for inviting me to participate in this hearing, and also for the quick action that was taken last year with programs like the Economic Entry Disaster Loan, Paycheck Protection Program, and CARES Act funding. Given that this was the first time that an unforeseen disaster affected virtually every business in the country at the same time, I think that the actions of Congress and the SBA were key to averting what could have been a much more serious crisis. These programs continue to help save businesses across the country. So again, thank you for that. That being said, the small business landscape has changed and serious challenges remain. The subject today is entrepreneurship in the new economy, and my testimony will focus on 4 main areas: access to capital, reducing the digital divide, manufacturing, and working with underserved communities. Access to capital for small businesses, and especially startups, remains a challenge. In fact, if a business needs a small loan of $10,000 or $20,000, I'm only aware of one bank in Chicago, CIBC, that actively markets programs to meet that need. There are, of course, also some nonprofit lending options. However, these are typically at a higher interest rate and less desirable than a bank loan. I'd like to see more banks offering micro-lending and startup funding, and I'd like to see the reporting process for lenders streamlined to make small business lending more attractive. It's my understanding that there's legislation now that may, on the books right now, that may significantly increase reporting requirements in all small business loan applications. And I am concerned that this may negatively impact my clients. Access to capital is key to supporting entrepreneurship in the new economy. Next, I'd like to address computer literacy. The digital divide is real, especially in underserved communities. Today, computer literacy and basic business training are as key to an entrepreneur's success as being able to read or write was 20 years ago. We need to do better with this by making basic computer skills training and business assistance programs widely available across the country. In fact, when CARES Act funding ends next fall, many small business development programs across the country will actually see a decrease in capacity, and this is a concern. Next, I'd like to address manufacturing. Last year's difficulty in obtaining vital PPP supplies and this year's supply chain issues demonstrate a clear need to support our domestic manufacturing capabilities. Certainly, a simplification of the federal procurement process would be a start. And finally, I'd like to discuss the underserved population. Here on Chicago's South Side, we have a diverse and vibrant small business community, including a significant number of immigrant business owners who hold ITINs instead of Social Security numbers. Currently, these business owners are shut out of most SBA lending programs. I certainly don't presume to jump into the immigration debate. However, if a business seeks to expand, buy equipment, a building, or create jobs, I'd like to be able to present the same options to all my clients. Perhaps the most disadvantaged of the underserved populations are the disabled people. Advances in technology and making small business ownership a much more viable option for our disabled population. This is a trend that is only going to increase in the coming years. I'd like to see more of an effort made to include these entrepreneurs into the wider business development world. Thank you again for having me, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fogerty. Ms. Devon, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairwoman Velázquez, Ranking Member Lukemeyer, and members of the House Committee on Small Business, thank you for the opportunity to testify at today's hearing titled Entrepreneurship in the New Economy. My name is Stephanie Devon, and I'm the Vice President of Entrepreneurship and Business Development at the National Urban League. I bring you greetings on behalf of Mark Morial, our President and CEO. The National Urban League is a historic civil rights community-based organization dedicated to economic empowerment and the guarantee of civil rights for African Americans and other underserved communities in America. We are a national nonprofit intermediary and provide direct comprehensive services that improve the lives of nearly 2 million people each year through our network of 91 Urban League affiliates in 36 states and the District of Columbia. In my role, I manage, oversee, and advocate on behalf of 12 Urban League Entrepreneurship Centers, which provide management, counseling, mentoring, and training services for entrepreneurs looking to start, grow, or scale their business. While the typical client of the Entrepreneurship Center program is a low to moderate income African American woman with an existing business, our centers also serve Caucasian, Hispanic, Asian American entrepreneurs. In 2020, our centers helped approximately 23,928 participants secure $108.6 million in financing and contract opportunities, as well as save or create 714 full or part-time jobs through our counseling and training services. The COVID-19 pandemic and resulting economic disruption has disproportionately impacted minority businesses and also exacerbated existing structural inequities in small business lending. In April 2021, Federal Reserve survey found that the minority-owned businesses were simultaneously hardest hit by pandemic-related closures and were only half as likely as white-owned firms to receive the necessary Paycheck Protection Program, small business relief funding they needed to pay their workers and stay afloat. For minority-owned business, the racial wealth gap and implicit bias have made securing access to capital exceedingly difficult. During the pandemic, our entrepreneurship centers conducted training, workshops, and counseling sessions through digital and telephonic means with clients. We hosted webinars to guide entrepreneurs experiencing cash flow issues through the disaster loan application process and provided links to resources to help entrepreneurs develop disaster recovery plans. From June 1st, 2020 through May 31st of this year, with support from a CARES Act MBDA award, our centers helped 11,250 businesses secure $137.6 million in financing and contract opportunities, as well as save or create 1,174 full and part-time jobs through over 15,800 hours of counseling and over 33,000 hours of training. Specifically, our services were directed at providing COVID relief to minority businesses lacking access to capital, or with inadequate financial management practices and less flexible operating models. We also received support through the PepsiCo Foundation to run our Black Restaurant Accelerator program, which is helping keep the doors of small businesses in the food and beverage industry open. One of the program's beneficiaries is Boku Eats, a New Orleans neighborhood eatery that provides full-service catering and meal prep services. Here is what owner Keisha Reed had to say about the program. The grant from PepsiCo allowed us to purchase 3 tents, which meant we could serve at least 50 people and overhead costs were lowered. Given the current 72-hour test and vaccine card mandate for inside eating and the inside reduction, we were only able to accommodate 6 to 10 people on the inside at any given time. Without the assistance of the grant, we wouldn't be able to generate the revenue needed to stay in business during this ongoing pandemic. I also note that the National Urban League was just awarded a $5 million Small Business Administration Community Navigator Award, which will allow us through 25 Urban League affiliates to reduce barriers for minority-owned businesses through critical support and resources. Last year, Black-owned businesses saw a surge in sales corresponding to the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. However, as public support for it began to stagnate, business owners saw sales level off. In the new economy, Black-owned small businesses continue to experience a slower path to returning to pre-pandemic employment levels and face a more uncertain future recovery relative to their peers. Many Black-owned businesses continue to lack access to capital needed to fully recover due to implicit bias and a legacy of racism. To ensure a full economic return for minority-owned businesses in this new economy, we urge Congress to enact civil rights protections and guardrails that resolve racial disparities in access to capital while increasing access to prime government contract opportunities, mentorship, minority incubator support, and technical skills training. Please see my submitted testimony for more detailed recommendations. On behalf of the National Urban League, thank you for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Devon. And now we recognize Mr. Keating for 5 minutes.
Chairwoman Velázquez, Ranking Member Lukemeyer, members of the committee, thank you for hosting this important hearing. My name is Raymond Keating. I'm Chief Economist with the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council. For more than 26 years, SBE Council has worked to strengthen and improve the ecosystem for startups and small business growth. As you all know, entrepreneurs take on risks and uncertainty in order to innovate, introduce new products and services, and find better ways to do things. And by doing so, they boost productivity, enhance competition and choice, fuel economic growth, and create new jobs. Indeed, entrepreneurs, along with the investors who are essential for funding startups and business growth, are central to the economic, income, and employment growth we all want to see happen. For our economy, in my written testimony, I looked at key indicators on where we stand right now. By the second quarter of 2021, entrepreneurs, investors, businesses, and workers had worked to get the economy back to where it was pre-pandemic. However, we still face the task of getting back to where we should be, given the lost growth, and then maintaining strong growth thereafter. Unfortunately, 2% real GDP growth, which is where we stood in the third quarter, is anemic under normal circumstances. At 2% growth, U.S. Economic underperformance will be extended far into the future. We need to do much better, and that will depend significantly on the state of entrepreneurship. So I go on to look at various measures of entrepreneurship in my testimony. It's clear that entrepreneurship was lagging well before the pandemic. It suffered when COVID hit and has struggled to come back in many ways. But hope can be found in the trend in new business applications. After suffering big declines when the pandemic first struck, the number of business applications quickly skyrocketed beyond where they had been prior to the pandemic and have remained at elevated levels. The historical relationship between such applications and actual business formations indicates that there again is reason for hope, although it must be noted that a pandemic and economy is uncharted waters. At the same time, the expansion of what many call the gig economy would support this data, as would more people positively considering entrepreneurship due to their pandemic experiences, as we've heard here already. As for challenges for entrepreneurs, there are many, some being evergreens and others specific to our current situation. For example, a key evergreen, again, is financing. We've heard people talk about that already. As businesses reach various stages, though, angel investors and venture capitalists, for example, become vital for providing the funds to fuel innovation and growth. And regarding our current situation, again, in my written testimony, I explore the labor shortages, supply chain challenges, and inflation. These are all quite real and quite significant issues, creating problems, risks, and uncertainties. Of course, there are also expanding opportunities for entrepreneurs. I highlight two areas in my written testimony. The first is technology, whether generating new products, improving and enhancing production, and/or expanding distribution. Technological advancements in areas like computer, digital, and broadband technologies, for example, have served to expand opportunities for entrepreneurs. Social media, again, as we've heard, for instance, has served to help create and transform businesses. A second major area of expanding opportunities for entrepreneurs is the international marketplace. Technology advancements coupled with economic growth abroad have opened doors in the international arena for entrepreneurs. Keep in mind that 95% of the world's consumers are outside the United States. And as the data show, international markets are not the near exclusive domain of large businesses, as many assume. Finally, in this, getting the public policy mix right is always critical for our economy and for entrepreneurship, but getting it right becomes even more critical as we struggle to emerge from a pandemic economy. I just offer what I call a pro-entrepreneur policy framework in my testimony. Avoiding tax increases and providing substantive and permanent tax relief that enhance incentives for starting up, building, and investing in businesses. Emphasizing regulatory relief, not imposing additional regulatory burdens. If anyone understands the costs of regulation, it would be small business owners, especially as those costs mount with more and more regulations imposed, regulation after regulation. Advancing free trade is critical, reducing government-imposed costs on trade, such as tariffs, is pro-growth. And the U.S. really needs to reclaim its global leadership role on trade. Also implementing a constructive immigration policy agenda that expands avenues of immigration for those who wish to contribute by working and starting businesses, while enhancing security, of course, to keep out terrorists and others who would do us harm. That's a pro-entrepreneur framework that we put forward. Thank you again for your invitation to be part of this hearing today, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fogerty. And thank you to all our witnesses. We really appreciate all you have shared with us today. And I will begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. And I would like to address my first question to Ms. Devon. As Americans quit their jobs in record numbers, women are leading the change in what is known as the Great Resignation. Ms. Devon, what shift in the labor force occurred during the pandemic to make women more likely to launch a small business?
Thank you for that question, Chairwoman Velázquez. My experience through our entrepreneurship centers is that many of the women that started businesses during the pandemic had been laid off from their jobs, similar to Ellie, who told her story. Many of these women business owners had decided at that point to start their own business. Some of them were passion projects, some of them were built out of necessity, but many of the business owners that we saw were women, and they were using that opportunity to start businesses. They used and utilized our centers, which had technical assistance services, counseling and mentoring and training services to start businesses. In addition to that, many of them saw opportunities through grant programs that the National Urban Leagues and other organizations made available that were specifically for women-owned businesses to start and grow their businesses. In addition to that, there were grants available for minority women-owned businesses to help undergird some of the training that we were providing to them.
Thank you for that answer. Ms. Diop, what advice do you have for others that are considering to starting a business during times of uncertainty?
Thank you, Chairwoman Velázquez, for that question. I would definitely advise women who want to start businesses in a time of uncertainty or at any time to utilize the resources that they have available to them to the fullest extent. And that may be monetary, but also I would advise them to utilize the resources within themselves. Many times we don't realize that the experience we've gained in jobs or in life can directly lend to success in business. And I know for myself, everything that I have put into my coaching and consulting business are skills and experience that I have gained throughout corporate America and just throughout college and all of the experience that I have. So I think that's a number one thing is I always teach my clients to make a list of everything you know how to do, your experiences, your knowledge, your skills, and pull a business from that list. That way you are more guaranteed to succeed because you are naturally working within something you already know how to do rather than venturing off into a business that you think you should start based on what everything
Thank you.
else says.
Thank you for that answer. Mr. Fogerty, during the pandemic, many businesses have struggled to adapt to the changing nature of work and have faced challenges with supply chain issues, access to capital, and employee retention. Can you please describe your role at 36 Square Business Incubator and how a $1 billion investment in incubators in the Build Back Better Act will help create more entrepreneurs?
Certainly. Well, I certainly agree with the testimony of the previous witnesses. What we do is provide assistance and support, not only through the SBDCs. I also have colleagues in the ITCs, International Trade Centers. This is a network of professionals who at no charge will help manufacturers and facilitate their exports, as Mr. Keating alluded to. We also have what's known as, I also have colleagues who are what's known as PTACs, Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. And these are available across the country, as are SBDCs and ITCs. The PTACs will facilitate and assist entrepreneurs with getting government contracting. We're also in the city of Chicago as neighborhood business development centers. So my point is there is a lot of free assistance out there. We don't have all the answers, but we have a number of resources so that we can find the answers. And I think it's important to support small business development centers, entrepreneurship centers, incubators, as they reach out and try and guide entrepreneurs and small businesses through this time.
Thank you. Mr. Keating, I just ran out of time. Maybe if we go into a second round, I'll be able to ask you a question. Thank you very much. And now I recognize Mr. Williams, Vice Ranking Member of the Committee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I want to thank our ranking member, too, and witnesses for being here today. Every American can see that our country is facing one of the worst supply chain shortages in history. I see it firsthand. I'm a car dealer, have been for 51 years, employ hundreds of people, and I can tell you it's serious. And U.S. ports are struggling to unload deliveries, and inventories are sitting on container ships in the middle of the ocean. Families are preparing for the most expensive Thanksgiving meal ever. We're told that by the administration, and worry if Christmas gifts will even be available. This supply chain crisis has become a substantial issue for small businesses across the country, forcing business owners to make operational adjustments in order to compensate for the lack of inventory and revenue. So, Mr. Keating, what are small businesses who operate on fixed margins to do when they don't have a product to sell or can't afford to pay their workers? And what do you think the long-term effects of these supply chain disruptions will have on our economy?
Well, I agree with you 100%. And in terms of small business owners, they're being impacted more so than large firms just because they operate on such thin margins. The long-term issue, listen, in the short term, this is going to be an issue that we need government to not impose additional burdens, like I mentioned in my testimony, taxes, regulations, things like that, provide relief where they can. And then the private sector is going to work through this. It's going to be very painful. It's already been very painful. And then the question is how, the long-term effect is going to be determined by how many businesses survive these issues and these problems. We've already seen what the pandemic has done. I mean, various surveys, either we've lost hundreds of thousands or even millions of small businesses during the pandemic. So now we've got this additional issue of working through trying to get back to where we were at least. And the long-term impact is going to be, again, how many small businesses have we lost? I take some hope in those business application numbers where you see people think, at the very least, they're thinking about entrepreneurship as an option, and that's what we're going to need going forward.
Right, perfect. Let's talk about inflation. It's still on the rise, and hardworking Americans are paying more for food, gas, and other utilities. And a recent report by the Department of Labor showed that inflation has spiked to 5.3%, a record high in 13 years. So, meanwhile, Democrats continue their push to inject over $3 trillion of new federal spending into the economy and threatening to worsen inflation for months or years to come. So the Biden administration refuses to acknowledge the risk of hyperinflation. They argue that proposed spending packages are fully paid for and will have no impact on inflation. So again, quickly, Mr. Keating, in your testimony, you state that the inflation numbers are undeniable. And can you talk briefly about the current impact of inflation, whether you think it's transitory like the Federal Reserve argues?
Yeah, I always get concerned when the Fed, whose primary responsibility is stable prices, kind of poo-poos what's going on with inflation. So I'm not quite clear how long this is going to last. I don't think any of us are, and that's part of the problem, right? Inflation comes with uncertainty, there's volatility, all of the issues that, higher interest rates, all of these problems. So the issue going forward, I wish I heard more from the Fed that, hey, listen, we're taking this inflation issue very seriously, and perhaps we're going to start to rein in this historically unprecedented loose monetary policies that we've been running really since the summer of 2008. I think that would be a great step. And then also on the fiscal side of things, inflation is all about too much money chasing too few goods. I like the idea of incentivizing the production of more goods. So if we could have pro-growth fiscal policies, meaning tax, regulatory, trade policies, combined with some monetary restraint, that's how we get out of this mess in the 1980s when we had stagflation, and that's how we're going to get out of the mess today.
Okay, quickly, in the time I have remaining, in your opinion, what are the impacts of higher taxes and increased government regulations on small businesses, particularly on the heels of the COVID-19 setbacks? Higher taxes do nothing but hurt business. We need to cut taxes. So quickly, how do you feel about that?
Well, you're right on. Listen, higher taxes always come with costs for negatives for the economy, negatives for small business. And then when you're thinking about doing it as we struggle to get out of a pandemic economy, I'm bewildered by that. This is the worst possible time to be imposing higher taxes and more regulatory burdens. And without a doubt, you could talk about targeting at this income level or that income level. Ultimately, everybody gets hurt, and largely because investors get hit. That means less capital for entrepreneurs, and we need entrepreneurs again to drive innovation, economic growth, and job creation.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I yield my time back.
The gentleman's time, the gentleman yields back, and now we recognize the gentlelady from Kansas, Ms. Davis, Chairwoman on the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Tax, and Capital Access, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And I'm excited about this hearing today. America's small businesses and small business owners, entrepreneurs have really faced enormous and unprecedented challenges over the last year and a half because of COVID. We've heard about that during this time from our witnesses. And we also heard that against all odds, we are seeing Americans start new businesses. Even in 2020, 4.3 million new businesses were started, and that's the highest number of new businesses over the last 15 years. So while we have unprecedented difficulties, we're also seeing unexpected and inspiring startup an unexpected and inspiring startup surge. It's I think, a testament to the entrepreneurial spirit that we've got in this country, and I'm glad we're taking the time to understand that today. And so, my first question, Ms. Diop, is that the okay? I wanted to ask you about, in your written testimony, you mentioned that you became an entrepreneur because you had to. And I think that's something that a lot of folks face. But I'm curious of the things that you were able to navigate. Can you share with us a little bit about the challenges that you didn't see coming, and what were those?
Thank you so much, Ms. Davids. Certainly, there were challenges that I ended up facing, which I couldn't have anticipated. And I would say the largest one is learning how to go from a one woman or person business to then delegating and expanding it. As I mentioned in my testimony, started my business out of necessity because I couldn't find a job, but I had children. I needed to take what I knew how to do and turn it into a business that could then serve others. Where the shift happened and where the first challenge really came is, okay, now how do I take this and make it something that's not only about me, but then can create a space for other people who either need a job or further need support in their own businesses. So scaling is a huge part of entrepreneurship, a huge part of running a small business, and can be the largest challenge. But I was able to navigate that through research, support, and trial and error.
Thank you. And the idea of scaling and kind of those almost like back office type of skills. The Kauffman Foundation, which is based in the Kansas City area, the Kansas Third is on the Kansas side of the Kansas City metro area, and the Kauffman Foundation has done a lot of research, and they talk about accounting and legal advice. And I'm curious about how that's one of the biggest obstacles. I'm curious how you handled, you mentioned research. Like, what kind of steps did you take to address that?
Absolutely. So I did ask a lot of questions. I'm very grateful that in my time running this business, I've been able to make connections. And so a lot of the clients who would book me for a call would actually be in the fields of the legal field, or perhaps they were in the field of finance. And so in exchange for me helping them to gain clarity on how to scale their own businesses, I was then able to ask them, well, since you're in the financial field, what should I do? Since you're in the legal field, what steps can I be taking to really expand this so that it's not just my small business, but something that can really grow and walk on its own legs. So that was a key element of my research. And then as well, I'm from Los Angeles, California. So I looked up small business development programs and centers near me where I could go and ask questions. How do I navigate this next step? I've done this much so far by myself, but I know that I need further support. So those types of programs, such as the one you mentioned in Kansas, are so very needed. I really did mine the scrappy way by just, researching and figuring it out. But when people can have access to information that provides them with that necessary infrastructure support, it really strengthens their ability to be a long-term, lasting business.
Thank you for that. And I think, from your description about how you got into being an entrepreneur, and also from Ms. Devane, the work that they're doing, and now as a community navigator grantee, it sounds like one of the things that we need to do is try to make sure that our resources from the federal perspective are available and known to everyone. With that, I'll yield back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Gentle lady yields back, and now we recognize the ranking member, Mr. Lukemeyer.
Let's go to Mr. Buser next.
Yeah. Okay. So the gentleman from Pennsylvania, ranking member on the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Tax and Capital Access, Mr. Muser, is recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman Velázquez, and thank you to our Republican leader, Mr. Lukemeyer, and thank you very much to our witnesses, and thank you, Ms. Diop, for being here with us, and to all on virtual. Clearly, the last 19 months have been very challenging for small business. Even though I'm a member of Congress, I've been experiencing it from my past life, as well as just working with the constituents and helping them through and navigating through the COVID crisis, from PPP to shutdowns to you name it. Ms. Diop, your story was compelling, amazing. Congratulations. I want to ask you a couple of questions about that. But first, I'm going to just go to Mr. Keating. Mr. Keating, as small businesses, entrepreneurs, as you've mentioned a couple of times, have dealt with cost of goods, shortages, all kinds of cost increases, inflation, wage increases, which we all like, but when they come so suddenly and creates the shortages as well as the added unexpected expenses. Government is not in the business of creating jobs. Government's role is to create the best environment possible for the private sector to create those jobs. So in light of the many issues that exist, workforce, I mentioned them, inflation, cost of good increases, supply chain problems, pending OSHA mandates, how has government done in helping or worsening small businesses' challenges? Mr. Keating?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'd like to say we were doing better than we are. When you look at all the signals that entrepreneurs, small businesses investors are getting from Washington, it's been, what taxes are we going to increase? Let's look at all sorts of new regulatory initiatives. And they span across from labor to antitrust and everything in between. We still haven't unwound tariffs that were imposed. So, there's not much going on the trade front to be able to expand opportunities. So bottom line is, the overarching signals are not positive from the federal government, I would argue, on a policy in terms of policies for small businesses.
Okay, so perhaps reversing some of those, keeping taxes competitive so goods made in Asia are not more competitive, regulations that do affect supply chain. That's what we should, in your view.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And regulatory reform in a positive sense would be great. I mean, imagine if the business community, including entrepreneurs and small businesses, were hearing from Washington that, hey, we're going to start sunsetting regulations so that we can assess each one if it makes sense going forward, right? How about we have more input from Congress rather than leaving it all to appointees and bureaucrats, right? Having Congress actually approve each rule and regulation. So those types of reforms would be a big plus, I think.
Right. Hey, thanks a lot. Ms. Diop, so you're based in Los Angeles? Well, again, congratulations. Your determination, hard work, probably a lot of smart work as well, a tremendous amount of thinking and probably loss of sleep. But really, really great American business story. So taxes in LA and federal taxes, I'm not going to ask you what you pay in taxes. It's your business, but I would guess it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40%. Do you think that that's helpful to your business? Or let's just talk about that a little bit. Would raising those taxes affect you? Would you prefer them to stay where they are? Would you like to see them lowered a little bit? How would that help your small business?
Yes, thank you so much for your question, Mr. Muser. Taxes are definitely a challenge and the biggest wake-up call in this entrepreneurship journey that I've had. I think that, taxes as a new business owner can be navigated more thoroughly with proper education and with proper support. I think one thing that is lacking is taxes are almost like a smack in the face when you start a business. There isn't any, preparation to help a small business owner know what they need to expect in terms of the magnitude of what the tax rate can be and how to fully prepare for it. I do think that as small business owners, lower taxes can certainly help because of the fact that we are already operating on margins that, we have to pay other employees, we have to, pay for other startup capital depending on what type of business that you're in.
I'm sorry, I'm out of time, but Madam Chair, I would just like to ask, perhaps Ms. Diop can provide us with what you would like to see us do to help your clients and to help you. So maybe we can do that either in a second round, or maybe you could just send us an email on that.
Okay.
I yield back, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. The gentle lady from Illinois, Ms. Newman, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a quick question for Mr. Fogerty and then for Ms. Diop. So Andrew, first of all, good to see you. Can you share a little bit what you think would be the number one most powerful thing for that Congress can do to help incubators, particularly with entrepreneurs of color and entrepreneurs with disabilities? If you could nail a number one down that Congress could do to provide incubators specifically, and then providing and empowering more incubators, what would that be?
Well, support, of course, in the financial sense for incubators. And I'd also, for disadvantaged entrepreneurs, especially the severely disadvantaged entrepreneurs that I deal with blind people, severe disabilities, I would like to see some sort of a grant program. Right now, I have a chef who's blind. I'd love to see her be able to get a space at O'Hare. She had a restaurant and fortunately closed it just before the pandemic. It was a great time to close a restaurant so that she could start a family, but she's getting ready to get back into it. She would do well at a place like O'Hare or Midway, but the cost of getting into one of those spaces is really prohibitive for a disabled entrepreneur. So, certain segments of our entrepreneurship world do need grants and startup support. And we should also encourage the lenders, the banks, perhaps through the CRA program, to support both incubators and the entrepreneurs themselves.
Thank you very much. And then Ms. Diop. So first of all, congratulations. Amazing. So what, if you think back to when you were first starting, what do you think would have been the number one thing that would have helped you with what you're calling the surprise around taxes? And it is, so I was in exactly your shoes 17 years ago, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. Now, as we all know that once you identify your deductions properly, legally, and ethically, and all of those things, your taxes come down greatly. And then when you choose a tax category, it's a breeze then, and actually it's much better to be in small business than big business. And as you know, moving forward, your rate will likely stay the same or lower based on the Build Back Better plan. So I just wanted to clarify that for the record. That said, what would be the number one thing, maybe in terms of small business literacy on the ledger side or whatever, that would have been, gosh, it would have been good to know that?
Yes, thank you so much, Ms. Newman, for your question. I would definitely say that what would have been helpful at the very beginning is perhaps when small businesses go to register for their business and they're in that initial phase of becoming official, any type of documentation or any type of maybe a letter, just something that can really assist them with understanding, okay, now that you've registered a business, here are the most common deductions for the category you've chosen, for the industry that you've chosen. Here are ways that you should be tracking those deductions. Here are resources maybe near you or resources online that can help you to start practicing tracking your deductions and proper accounting measures. Because once I got a handle on my taxes and the expenses, I then immediately had to start coaching other business owners on the proper ways to track their own expenses and track their income, because truly they had no idea. And if you don't set aside a certain amount of money, then you're slapped with a very large tax bill that then can really set you way back, and you almost feel like you're starting your business from the beginning if you're not fully prepared. So I definitely think measures like that would be very helpful and can further educate business owners even before they start the business on, hey, here's everything you need to be ready for.
Yeah.
Yes, it's great, but also make sure that you know what to do when it comes to paying your taxes and when it comes to doing it the legal and ethical way.
Well stated, and thank you, and great idea. So thank you for your time, and I yield back to your.
Gentle lady yields back. The gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Stover, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The COVID shutdowns were devastating to communities and the American economy. By the end of 2020, government lockdowns eased, businesses began to reopen, and our economy started to rebound. Things were on the up, and businesses had great optimism. But the Democrats marched forward with their first partisan spending spree, the American Rescue Plan, a $1.9 trillion package, despite the nation's positive recovery trends. This was the beginning of the many crises we are facing today. First, the cost of the American Rescue Plan has caused immense inflation. Gasoline is up 42.1%. Electricity is up 5.2%. Transportation is up almost 5%. And all these costs mean less money for our small business owners to take home to their families, who, by the way, are having to pay 12.6% more for meat, 12.6% more for eggs, and 11.9% more for their children's footwear. Second, the American Rescue Plan continued to pay people more money not to work. Now, U.S. employers are still struggling to fill more than 10.4 million job openings. Labor shortages for truck drivers, dock workers, warehouse employees. No wonder there are issues with our supply chain. So here we are in the middle of a crisis. Prices of goods continue to skyrocket right before the holidays. Shelves are empty. A real look at what the Biden agenda has gotten the American people so far. And yet, the Democrats say, let's spend more, trillions more. And how will they pay for it? How are we going to pay for that? Oh, that's right. Taxes again on small businesses. That is wrong. I simply do not understand how my Democratic colleagues can convince themselves that they are doing good work on behalf of the American people. With that, I would like to use the remainder of my time to turn to the testimony of our witnesses, and I thank you all for being here today. Mr. Keating, do you know how many small businesses are organized as Subchapter C corporations or pass-through businesses?
Actually, most businesses are pass-through businesses, S corps, LLCs, sole proprietorships, and so on. So that's the bulk of. It's over 90%, I believe, off the top of my head, are non-C corps.
Okay, so close to 90%. So can you speak to how an increase in the corporate tax rate and a limitation on Section 199A deduction will harm these businesses?
Well, there's a couple of things real quick about the corporate tax. First off, there's this misnomer going around that most C corps are large businesses. And again, when you break down the numbers, most C corps are small businesses, small and mid-sized companies. So when you're talking about an increase in the corporate income tax rate, you're talking about an increase directly on many small businesses. And then obviously, any kind of tax increase on C corps are going to affect their universe, their network of businesses as well, which obviously covers non-C corps that serve those businesses, that work with those businesses and work with their employees.
Well, thank you very much. I think that, Madam Chair, Ranking Member Luke Meyer, I appreciate you holding this hearing. And you know, we've always talked about small businesses are the engine of our economy. They're an engine of Main Street. And we continue to tax them and put devastating policies, not allowing them to succeed. We need to protect small businesses and ensure they're the engine of our economy. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from California, Ms. Chu, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Ms. Diop, I was so inspired to hear your story. And as a representative of Los Angeles Area Congressional District, I was especially inspired. You faced obstacles that could have defeated so many people, having been rejected from job interviews 53 times, but you used your creativity and determination to use the $1,200 stimulus check that we sent out to start your own business. And I was thrilled to hear that because of your success, you hired 5 people and are planning to hire 5 more for 10 people total. So, Ms. Diop, in April, I reintroduced my legislation, HR 2680, the Progress Act, which would support the smallest of businesses, those without any employees, by helping them expand and incentivize third-party investment. This legislation will create a refundable payroll tax for non-employer firms that hire their first full-time employee, and also an investment credit to encourage third-party capital investment into non-employer firms. Non-employer firms are much more likely to be owned by women and female entrepreneurs on average, and start out with roughly half the capital as male entrepreneurs, hence the legislation. So can you talk about how policies to level the playing field by having such incentives for first-time employees as well as third-party investment could help entrepreneurs like you?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for your question, Representative Chu. I would definitely agree that incentives to level the playing field, to use your words, and assisting new business owners as well as new women business owners can certainly be helpful, because especially those of us who are new entrepreneurs that are mothers, we have an entirely different set of challenges to face when it comes to starting a business. So any measures and incentives that could alleviate some of those to, for example, in my case, give me access to I had the $1,200, but any other programs that provide grants or simply just access to resources to further assist in starting a business in that way is certainly helpful.
Hey, thank you for that. Mr. Fogerty, thank you for your testimony. I'm glad that you mentioned that many small businesses struggle to access affordable loans for smaller amounts on the private market, even some nonprofit lenders. And in fact, you say that the access to capital is a challenge. And of course, also some nonprofit lender options exist, but that they are typically at a higher interest rate and are less desirable than a bank loan. So that's why I've been working for years to authorize the Community Advantage Loan Program, which provides SBA-backed 7A loans to this exact subset of small businesses, those who cannot qualify for an affordable loan from a commercial bank or traditional 7A lender, but need financing that's under $250,000. So I'm so pleased that the current Build Back Better framework does include $275 million in funding for the Community Advantage program. So can you elaborate on this gap in the lending market for smaller dollar loans and what that means for small business borrowers? And can you discuss how SBA programs like Community Advantage, which leverages a government subsidy to offer favorable rates to borrowers, can play in filling the gap?
Sure. The SBA loans programs, all of them, including the Community Advantage, are key to small business growth, and I'm all for them, and they should certainly be supported. It's certainly good legislation. Although, as I did say before, here in Chicago, especially on the southwest side, we have a number of ITIN holders who cannot access most of those loan programs. Every small business, every startup, when they're looking for small loans, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, it's really not worth the bank's while, in my opinion, to make those loans happen. So I'd like to see some way of incentivizing the banks, streamline the reporting procedures, helping us as the business advisors make these loans available to small businesses, because there is that gap from the small amount of startup funding when you get going. And then when you're ready to expand, hire employees, you're not looking for $1 million loan. Many of my clients are looking for $20,000, $30,000, and there just are not a lot of choices out there. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now we recognize the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Tenney, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Velázquez and Ranking Member Lukemeyer, for holding this meeting. I'm a small business owner in New York. Our business is celebrating its 75th year through a very difficult landscape in New York, high taxes, a lot of frustration with, obviously, with the employment situation now. But 95% of the businesses and the people in my district actually got a tax cut from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Only the wealthiest actually received a tax increase under the last plan. And it was a breather for us to finally get some relief to reinvest in our communities, reinvest in our business from the heavy tax burden that's put on us by New York State. But my question and my concern is that 60 or plus or more percentage of these new jobs always come from the small business community like ours. We'd love to expand and grow, and we know that venture capital is really important. But one of the things that in being the heart of the Industrial Revolution started in my district when the Erie Canal was started is the loss of a lot of these manufacturing jobs, a lot of jobs where there are a lot of the manufacturing sector where we have a lot of investment, but we need long-term solutions and we have long horizons that we need to meet, which we're going to stay in there for a longer period of time. So we also provide a lot of jobs for people who don't necessarily have to be skilled initially, but we want to put the training in. We take advantage of that if we can. And that's why, one of the initiatives I put through is the American Innovation and Manufacturing Act, which would, and I'm grateful for the bipartisan sponsorship of this bill, which would give innovation to small manufacturers and give them the flexible capital that they need. So this is really, we think this is a first step. But I wanted to ask first, Mr. Fogerty, because I know that this is a huge issue. It's a huge issue for my company. We're small. We only have 70 employees. But how important is it to support domestic manufacturing and that we need to streamline the reporting regulations? You alluded to it and investing in small business, but specifically dealing with the ability to thrive in a state like New York, where we have such heavy regulation?
Yeah, no manufacturer likes regulation, and they have been having a very, very tough time of it. I'd also, when I talked about streamlining, I think that the manufacturers that I work with would like to see some simplification, some streamlining of the procurement process. The Systems Award Management System, SAM, which is the federal government system for enrolling to get federal contracts. Last year, I had a couple of manufacturers pivot pretty quickly from what they were doing to making PPE. And this is a time when the masks were, in great demand. And they were able to pivot quickly, but they were not able to sell to the government in an expedited way. And some of the systems, as I said, the SAM system, I've helped a couple of blind entrepreneurs navigate the SAM system, and it's I don't want to be overly critical, but it certainly in need of an update.
We got some of that criticism as well. Good intentions, but in practice, it was tough for a lot of our entrepreneurs to really access it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we really need to. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say we really need to support domestic manufacturing, American manufacturing, through things like on-the-job training programs, so that we can bring a job seeker in, and the manufacturer, the employer, does not have to look to somebody who already has these skills. There's an incentive so they can train them in.
Yeah, and we've invested heavily in that with our business as well. Thank you. Mr. Keating, you said in your testimony that the recovery from the pandemic slowed dramatically in the third quarter of this year, FY 2021, and that real GDP grew at mere 2% in third quarter. You said this was largely because of the consumer pullback. What do you think consumers lost confidence in the recovery, and what steps can we do to restore confidence really quickly? Because I only have 20 seconds left.
It wasn't just consumers. It was also business investment pulled back. I think the signals, again, from Washington were very troubling. In your state, I'm one of the people that just left. I moved to Florida from New York. I grew up there. The tax and regulatory burden is a mess. That's what you have to deal with to get things right in New York, and good luck. But yeah, those signals from Washington, I think, had a real effect. Listen, I said for the longest time, and I know probably talking too much, but after we experienced the bounce back, my question has always been, what are we going to do then on the policy front to make sure that we accelerate economic growth going forward? And what we're seeing right now is not the answer.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
The gentlelady's time has expired, and now we recognize Mr. Evans from Pennsylvania for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Vaughn, it is great to have you here. And in my younger years, before I became a Pennsylvania state legislator, I worked as a job developer at the Urban League in Philadelphia. I've seen tremendous work that your organization does to advance economic opportunity for Black Americans and for those in underserved communities. Despite the toll the pandemic has taken on the economy here, there has been some silver lining. Last year, Americans filed paperwork to start 4.3 million new businesses. This is a 24% increase from 2019. This 24% surge in entrepreneurship was largely concentrated in Black and Hispanic communities with higher median income. Mr. Vaughn, this is my question to you. What factors do you think contribute to this increase in Black and Hispanic ownership businesses?
Thank you very much for the question, Representative Evans. And of course, once an urban leaguer, always an urban leaguer. It's great to see you. I think a couple of things have contributed to that. One is that many people were laid off from their jobs and needed, quite frankly, to find employment, and took to entrepreneurship as an opportunity to gain some economic freedom and independence. I think a number of other entrepreneurs came about because they wanted to start their passion projects. They turned their side hustles into businesses because the environment was right to do so. There were grants available from private companies. There were government grants available. There were PPP loans available for those who could get them. And I think for many business owners, this was an opportune time to delve into the workforce.
Mr. Devine, the National Urban League website states the number one challenge facing 80% of small business owners is lack of capital and cash flow. Has this changed during the pandemic? And if so, how?
Yeah, I mean, we saw our business owners tremendously affected by the pandemic. Most of them were already struggling beforehand. We've talked about that a little bit. They didn't have the back office, the fiscal systems, the operational systems, strategic management in place. And so when the pandemic hit, it was just exacerbated. And I think many of these businesses struggled and shuttered their doors. I think the ticket for many of these business owners is the technical assistance provided. Capital is sorely needed, and we've talked about that. But capital always has to be undergirded by coaching, by training and development. You don't know what you don't know, as Ellie found out with the tax situation. So I think for us, the National Urban League, our affiliate network through our entrepreneurship centers have been providing the knowledge and the tools and the skills that folks need to develop those operational systems, put fiscal management practices in place, and to help people to strategize to grow their businesses and to avoid this type of situation as they learn to pivot during crises.
Mrs. Devine, many small businesses fail after just a few years. Can you tell us what Congress can do to ensure many of the businesses that started during the pandemic, especially minority businesses, continue to grow and provide jobs and opportunities in their communities?
Absolutely. I think that what those businesses need, obviously capital is always sorely needed, but in addition to that, it's the technical assistance. I think that this SBA Community Navigator program is a great example of what government can do. This program will help to use trusted advisors such as the Urban League affiliates to go out into communities where business owners don't have access to these tools, don't understand what's available to them through the government, and we can go out and talk about the resources that are available and drive people to the SBA and to other organizations that can provide the skills that they need to grow these businesses. We really need technical assistance. We really need incubation programs that help people to develop and scale and grow their businesses, and we need capital.
I think I got a few more seconds left. My home city of Philadelphia had a poverty rate of 24.5% in 2020, with 2/3 of those in poverty being Black or Hispanic. How do we better reach Black and Hispanic entrepreneurs in communities with lower medium income?
We use trusted advisors like our Urban League affiliates. We live and we work in those communities. We know those communities. We provide wraparound services, not just entrepreneurship, through our Urban League affiliates. And those are the folks that know the business owners in those communities. Those are the ones that are trusted by the business owners. And those are the ones that need to be going out like we are doing through our Urban League affiliates, evangelizing, providing services, technical assistance, and capital to those business owners. And I think that's the ticket.
Thank you. You're back to balance my time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from California, Ms. Kim, ranking member on the Subcommittee on Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Workforce Development, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I would like to go right into questioning Mr. Keating. Can you elaborate on how continued lackluster job growth, like we saw this past September, this incentivizes individuals from establishing their own small business?
I'm sorry, the lack of job growth, is that what you're saying?
Yes, lackluster job growth.
Yeah, I think what we've heard here is absolutely correct. When you look at entrepreneurship, there are different types of entrepreneurs, right? Some dive into the waters, others get pushed. And what we saw during the pandemic is, I think, a combination of people being pushed, right? I put in my testimony, Walt Disney once said, when you can't get a job, you start your own business, right? And that's what we've seen here. But also, I think the fact that people have experienced more independent work or independence, and I think that has them thinking about being their own, owning their own business, looking towards entrepreneurship. I think in a very tough time, those are some of the positives that hopefully are going to come out of this.
If we're not hitting the mark with expected growth on GDP, how does that affect business confidence in the medium to long term?
Yeah, well, there's uncertainty now, right? And we saw the bounce back, the snap back And we were pleased about that, even with all the problems, supply chains and labor shortages. And then all of a sudden we see GDP kind of put the brakes on at 2% here. Now, there are a whole host of issues, I think, that are in the mix, including the Delta variant and so on and so on. But this just raises more questions. That's not good for business. It's going to raise more questions with investors, right? Because we saw part of the story on GDP was the slowdown of business investment. Business investment's critical now, and it's critical for future growth. So that just adds more uncertainty into the equation, and that has me concerned.
Yeah. I represent Southern California, and my home state of California has one of the highest unemployment rates in the country, and unemployment claims keep raising. I mean, it keeps going up, not decreasing. It is a concern for us from the big state of California. But Mr. Keating, in your written testimony, you noted a MetLife U.S. Chamber survey indicating 44% of small businesses are finding it harder to fill the open positions. So can you tell us if you have found a correlation between small businesses not having available workers and the decline in the labor force? Why do you think we're seeing a decrease in labor force participation?
Yeah, that's, when you look at that unemployment number, I always tell people, go deeper when you look at the unemployment rate, because right now we saw an improvement in the unemployment rate. Like, hey, wow, that's great, right? But part of that improvement was people leaving the labor force again. Now, with the pandemic, everybody should be coming back, right? So this is, again, it's an issue that's been around really since the 2008 recession. Why have people not come back to the labor force to the degree that they should? Some people say it's age, but when you zero in on the working age, 25 to 54, we're still not back to where we should be. So that has me very concerned. I'm hoping that these business application numbers maybe point to people becoming entrepreneurs. That would be a net positive, but I'm not quite sure what the answer is. There are a whole host of things, I think, culturally, economically, that are in the mix here. And again, that's something that I think we need to wrestle with and really delve into.
Something we need to continue to think about and worry about. One more question to you, Mr. Keating. Some parts of California are experiencing some of the highest average gas prices ever. In some parts where I am in Southern California, LA, Orange counties, they have hit a 13-year high. Someplace I saw close to $6 per gallon. Can you speak of how supply chain bottlenecks and even the threat of higher taxes can impact entrepreneur behavior?
Yeah, all those things are when you're talking about gas prices, right? That's fundamental to everybody, right? Including small business owners. So, California does have to deal with its own regulatory issues and tax issues. There's a reason why even when gas prices are low, you guys still tend to be among the highest. So I think part of it is a California issue,
average, yeah.
But then obviously nationally, we are all dealing with the bottlenecks and the shortcomings and so on. So again, I think it's a question of, yes, the private sector has got to work through this, but we've got to make sure that government allows private and doesn't get in the way of doing that.
Thank you very, very much. I'm happy to yield back the balance of my time.
Gentle lady yields back. Now we recognize the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Phillips, Chairman, Subcommittee on Oversight, Investigation, and Regulations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Greetings, colleagues, and great gratitude to our witnesses for being with us today. We all know the pandemic has wreaked havoc on our small business ecosystem, both in the U.S. and around the world. The recent surge in entrepreneurial activity, however, is really a welcome silver lining. I think we'd all agree. They represent seeds of optimism, if you will. Now we, Democrats and Republicans on this committee, have to do everything we can to water those seeds and ensure new businesses have access to the resources and mentorship and assistance necessary for them to keep their doors open and generate economic success. And I think it's fair to say that all of us on this committee want to see Americans become self-sufficient. But too many people who have dreams, entrepreneurial dreams and ideas, still can't access capital, mentorship, counsel, and assistance. I hope we can unite around this. And my first question is to you, Ms. Devon. I think it's fair to say that human beings tend to seek out others who share similarities. It's part of the human condition. It's also a phenomena that, in my estimation, can adversely affect already underserved communities. A lot of accredited investors, a disproportionate number, of course, in America, are older, white, and male, frankly, like me. And they tend to invest in entrepreneurs who share similar backgrounds. And you've noted in your testimony that this contributes to the very disparities we're talking about between white and minority-owned business owners and their abilities to access capital and counsel. So if you might just detail for us policies that you think can directly address that issue and help underserved communities with entrepreneurial dreams and ideas gain access to credit and other vital resources.
Certainly. Thank you for the question, Representative Phillips. I think that one of the things that needs to be addressed, and we've done this at the National Urban League, when the PPP program first came out and a lot of the Black-owned and other minority-owned businesses didn't have access, we worked with the government to make sure that minority depository institutions and CDFIs, those community-based and community and mission-driven institutions, played a role and had access to those programs so that they could provide those businesses with capital. Those are businesses that operate in underserved communities. They are trusted by those communities. Having support and the government supporting those types of financial institutions is certainly a ticket. Also ensuring that SBA lenders, who many of our business owners did not have relationships with, have access to and are incentivized to work with those small businesses, and also to certainly provide small dollar loans with low interest rates that are accessible and reasonable for small businesses is something that the National Urban League is very interested in making sure that our business owners have access to.
Great, I love that. If I could go a little further upstream. My friend and colleague, Representative Van Dyne from Texas, and I were speaking the other day about Business Day. I remember Business Day in my school, elementary school, where we learned to start a little organization, whether it's selling lemonade or a service or printing T-shirts, whatever you have. What do you think of that notion of trying to establish entrepreneurial education as part of the public curricula around the country so we can teach kids who don't have entrepreneurial models in their households or communities often, at least the underpinnings of business, and try to encourage a more self-sufficient entrepreneurial generation? What do you think of that notion?
That is a great question, and we are huge supporters of that notion. And in fact, we, and I live in New Rochelle, a little bit upstate of New York City, and our high school has an entrepreneurship program, and I'm starting to see many of those, and we are fully supportive of those types of programs. It's never too early for a child to have an option not to go into the workforce, but to be financially independent through owning their own business. And our Urban League affiliates are very successful, many of them with youth entrepreneurship programs down in the elementary and the high school level. As a matter of fact, our Los Angeles Urban League recently, over the summer, held a small business camp for youth entrepreneurs. And one of our entrepreneurs was extremely successful, just won $10,000 through another organization for pitching her business. And so we are very much in support of youth entrepreneurship. It's never too early.
Great. Since I only have 15 seconds left, if the three other witnesses would just raise your hand if you like that idea of trying to inspire business days and entrepreneurship education. Good, I like that. We don't see too much unanimity these days. Thank you all. I yield back my time and grateful to all of you for being with us.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Van Dyne, Ranking Member, Subcommittee on Oversight, Investigation, and Regulations.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chairwoman, and I appreciate Congressman or Chairman Phillips your shout out. Yeah, we have. It's amazing when you talk to each other how much you actually do have in common, and I appreciate your last question and everybody agreeing on it. When you actually try to find common ground, you can find it. So I appreciate that very much, and all of you being with us today. Over the past 2 years, small businesses have struggled to survive in this new economy. And as my colleagues on the other side have termed it, now as we look around, the environment our small businesses and entrepreneurs are living in is dismal. Every economic report we see falls short. GDP growth has slowed to 2%. And if you take into account what folks had, it's actually 0% that we have seen. Inflation has hit record levels, raising prices for all Americans, and labor is in short supply. And at a time when small businesses need to focus on keeping their shelves stocked, They must begin planning for the higher taxes and increased regulations that come within the two historic new spending bills that some progressive Democrats are rushing to pass. If we want to retain our uniquely American entrepreneurial spirit, the government shouldn't be paying people to stay more at home than to work and trying to regulate American businesses out of existence. Instead, we should be pushing for lower taxes and lower barriers to entry for entrepreneurs. Mr. Keating, I really appreciate your comments here today. A recent World Economic Forum report pointed out that supply chain barriers are harder to overcome for small businesses due to the significant capital investments needed. You know, we have seen Target, Walmart, others are able to figure it out. They've got other avenues, but small businesses simply don't. So in your view, how do regulations impact small business supply chains and their ability to adjust compared with larger firms?
Well, by definition, greater regulation is going to make you less innovative, there's less agility there to respond as needed. So that's a big part of the supply chain challenges. Now, on the positive side, to go positive for a moment, one of the things about small businesses is that they are more agile, right? So they can work to find ways to perhaps meet, the needs of their customers, where bigger businesses might be a little slower. I'm not denying your point. Your point is spot on in terms of the Walmarts and Amazons and so on. But the great thing about being a small business owner and entrepreneur is that you have that ability to pivot. And we've seen that in this pandemic. So the challenges are there. More regulation does not help. It hinders it. But being an entrepreneur in and of itself allows you to kind of do some things that a larger business can't.
We just left. It's ironic because I just left. I'm on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee as well. And we just had a focus on supply chain issues. And we had folks there with trucking, with shipping, logistics, and just talking about some of the barriers that government has actually put in their way of being able to be more productive, more efficient. And it's actually hurting the supply chain. One of the things that they discussed was the vaccine mandates. And obviously we're in a different moment labor-wise. So we've spoken with businesses of all sizes, and a common concern is the upcoming vaccine mandate that's being imposed by the Biden administration. How do you think this mandate will affect small businesses?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? And that's part of the problem is that we don't know. Our organization is always, we say we're pro-vaccine, anti-mandate. Businesses are pretty good at figuring out their own situation and maybe how they might have to deal with certain employees in a certain way, right? When government steps in and does the mandate thing, that doesn't, you don't have that ability to now deal with your particular situation and be able to deal with your particular employees. The flexibility is needed, I think, for small business owners in a big way.
I mean, the concern was, and I think, our Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg, was very callous in his response. The items in question are not simply Christmas gifts or toys. I mean, we're talking about liquid oxygen. We're talking about seeds and fertilizer to be able to put food into the ground for crops. We're talking
pharmaceuticals. I mean,
pharmaceuticals, things to be able to keep people's homes warm that don't live on a main grid. Can you explain to me what some of these logistic concerns are moving forward? And if you have in the next 18 seconds, any kind of federal regulations that you think that are impeding our progress?
Oh my goodness. Off the top of my head, I can't give you an exact regulation, but I think the key point that I'd like to make is all of those industries you mentioned and every single other one are overwhelmingly populated by small businesses. So it's very important for lawmakers to understand that whether they're talking about trucking, pharmaceuticals, all the way down the line, every one of those is about small business. The numbers are there. I mean, I can provide more data if you want, or you can go to our SBA Council website.
Time has expired.
Sorry.
The gentle lady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Houlihan, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much to all of you all for coming and joining us today. My questions are going to be focused on ESG, or environmental, social, and governance ideas, which I think are something that has gained a lot of traction over the past 15 or so years. And across the nation, and especially within my Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, business incubators have been serving as an important part to help startups and individual entrepreneurs scale their businesses. And they provide a range of services, as we've talked about, from legal advice to venture capital funding. But studies have shown, and the pandemic has borne out, that companies that have a strong environmental and social governance aspect or criteria to them have outperformed companies that did not during this very critical time. And in fact, this initial initiative was started in the heels of 2007 and 2008's financial meltdown. And so as the co-founder, along with Representative Phillips of the Stakeholder Capitalism Caucus, and as an entrepreneur myself who's built a lot of CSR, ESG companies, I really acutely and personally understand the importance of ESG as a model for investors to evaluate companies, for employees to decide which ones to work for communities to embrace these kinds of companies, for all of the different stakeholders who are involved in these small business enterprises to be able to understand what a good company looks like. So starting with Mr. Keating, if I could I ask you to speak to any efforts that the Incubator is acting on to encourage this kind of model for small businesses? And if it is, can you discuss why this model is important during the midst of a pandemic, or frankly, at any point in time? And if the Incubator does not encourage ESG criteria, can you explain why not?
I am not an expert in this area at all. The only thing I'll say generally as an economist, that I think it's great that we have all sorts of different business models out there, and ultimately consumer sovereignty. Consumers in the end decide what works and what doesn't in the marketplace, and we'll see that with these types of companies and other more traditional or innovative business models.
I think it's beyond the consumer. I think it's also investors. I think it's also employees. I think it's kind of the entire ecosystem, the entire stakeholder ecosystem that makes the determination. And as I mentioned, this kind of a company has really, I hesitate to say flourished, because I don't think many of us have flourished during this difficult time, but I think they've proved more resilient than any other kind of corporation or structure. So I would like to throw that open to anybody else on the panel. Ms. Diop, perhaps if you have any input in that, whether or not you are aware of these kinds of ideas and whether or not you are embracing of them.
Thank you so much for your question, Ms. Houlihan. Certainly, it's not my area of expertise, but I am from Los Angeles, California, and environmental measures are very important to us out there, and me personally. So I definitely think that access to more information about these types of programs so that small business owners or aspiring business owners could implement them into their business model would certainly be helpful, and would certainly be something that could even increase the awareness of these types of programs so that more people could participate.
Thank you. Does anyone else on the panel have any input into this question before I move on?
Yeah, this is Andrew. I'd just like to say I agree with the points that have been made. Most of our entrepreneurs, especially the younger ones, are very sensitive to climate change and the challenges that they create. One of my client companies, Omni Ecosystems, was started by Molly Meyer, and she's developed a low-weight soil. This is a little bit out of my league, the science stuff, but it's a low-weight soil so that now rooftop gardens or urban farms are much more viable options because they don't, it's lightweight soil and it retains moisture. So yeah, absolutely, climate change and being aware of the ecological impact is very important among.
Thank you, sir. And as a point of clarification, although the E obviously in the ESG is for environmental, the S and the G are for social and governance as well, and they have everything as well to do with how a company is structured, whether or not all employees or some employees are included in things like equity decisions, or whether the board is inclusive, those kinds of things, as well as making sure that we're thinking about the whole impact that a business has, and that there aren't externalities that are passed on to other organizations. And with that, I will yield back my time, and I really appreciate you guys and the opportunity to speak to you.
Gentlelady yields back, and now we recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Gavarino, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the ranking member for hosting this hearing today, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. Mr. Fogerty, I have a question for you. You said small businesses business owners with business planning, market research, and financing. In the current economic turmoil of labor shortages, price spikes, supply chain disruptions, and inflation, what advice are you giving them?
Well, it's very much depends on what type of business that I'm dealing with. Over the past 18 months or so, we've been very much focused on having businesses survive. So things like EIDL and the Paycheck Protection Program and that type of thing. Startup funding is, we're kind of repeating ourselves here, but startup funding is very much a challenge. I'm sure the other guests on the panel would agree. And small business funding to grow, small loans below $50,000 are also very difficult to come by. So as far as what I would say that for Congress, I would like to find some way, I would hope you would find some way of incentivizing banks to lend more to startups and to smaller amounts. And that's what I'm really hoping. But yeah, for the past 18 months, it's been a lot of work with government programs to make sure that the companies survive.
Okay, and then I imagine anybody dealing with getting companies to survive, a lot of businesses pre-pandemic did not have an online presence, and it was, I guess, for a lot of them to survive, they had to convert to at least having some sort of online presence. I am the ranking member on the Homeland Security Cybersecurity Committee as well, so and we've seen, especially over the past couple of years, a lot of ransomware attacks. Almost 50% of them are targeted at small businesses, and it's a small amount, but it's a small amount in the grand scheme of things, but not to a small business who often has to pay a couple $1,000s for a ransom. What are you, or any of the other witnesses on the panel today, what are you saying to clients or prospective clients or small business owners on how to deal with this issue? Because a lot of people don't understand cybersecurity, don't even put it at the top of their list when they're starting a business.
The Illinois Small Business Development Centers, of which we're a part, we do host cybersecurity experts where they will come and speak to the small businesses. And actually, the Gallery Incubator in Evanston, where I'm a volunteer mentor, they are very one of the founders is very savvy in the cybersecurity realm. So yeah, I can't agree with you more. Cybersecurity is key, and certainly an online presence is absolutely vital to any small business.
Yeah, and anybody else can jump in, but I would think most new people who are starting business now realize they have to have an online business. But I guess some of the small businesses that have been around for a while, it's something they never had to do before. I don't know if Mr. Keating or Ms. Devane or Diop want to join in with, what are you seeing with current small businesses and how are they doing making this change?
Sure. I would definitely add that you're 100% on point. One of the things that we saw with our small businesses, many of our businesses are more mature in age and more traditional and really aren't savvy or were not savvy with social media and with technological changes. And so it was a real eye opener for them. And we really had to help them transition into the digital world. Some of that was by necessity because everything had to be Zoom, nothing was in person, and everybody has phones. But the thing is that we really had to take the time to train them with those tools. Branding, marketing your business in a world that's virtual and social media was very important. And the other thing is through the CARES Act funding that we had, we ran about 7 different webinars and workshops for businesses to help them with COVID relief. And one of those was on cybersecurity. We still provide access to that through all of our affiliates and online to the National Urban League's website. So folks can go in anytime and look at that information.
If I could add, what's fascinating is some of the survey results that we've had in terms of the impact that this technology, social media, has had on starting up a business. One of the results we saw that 80% of people said that they were able to start up their business because of the affordable nature of online advertising. So it's not just, obviously it's helping existing businesses, but it's also boosting startups, which is a very exciting aspect of this.
I appreciate that, and I believe I'm out of time, so I yield back.
The gentleman yields back, and now we recognize the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Salazar, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Velázquez and Ranking Member Luetkemeyer for holding this important hearing. This comes up at a pivotal time for countless small business owners and their families nationwide. And I wanted to thank all the guests that have been here and exposing their testimony, specifically Mr. Raymond Keating, that you were mentioning how constructive pro-immigration policy agenda would be good for the economy. And I completely agree. So I wanted to ask you, what are the major changes to the immigration system that you think we should be implementing in this country directly to improve the small business community space?
Well, I think that number one, it's important to understand that foreign-born individuals have a much higher rate of entrepreneurship than native-born. So, and that shouldn't surprise us because, you know, it's pretty risky to move from one country to another. Having said that, I think some sort of entrepreneurial visa, right, is critical. Why aren't we offering this and attracting entrepreneurs from around the world to the United States? There's no downside. I can't figure out any kind of downside. So I think that's step one. And then obviously step two is just getting more our immigration policy more in tune with labor needs. You know, right now we're coming out of the pandemic, but not too far down the road, we're going to have additional problems in terms of working age population and so on, and at the lower end of skills and the upper end of skills. So I think immigration can help us with that issue in a big way, but the entrepreneurship aspect is critical.
And when you're telling me that the labor means, so you're talking about labor, you're talking about basically merit-based visas. Is that, what would be the ideal scenario according to you?
Yeah, well, I think that merit-based, the idea that this is what I want to do, I can do what I can contribute to the United States, as, you know, whether it's high-tech visas or, again, at the lower end of the skill level. So I think we just have to be more cognizant of the realities in our economy. I mean, listen, I'm an economist, so I would love our immigration policy to be focused more on economics than some of the politics that we hear being tossed about. And I think when you look at the economics of immigration, listen, every poll of economists always come out lopsided that immigration is a net economic plus for a country, and it can be in all sorts of ways, whether it's lower skilled workers, as I said, high skilled, or entrepreneurs.
So why do you think that we have not been able to pay attention to what the marketplace is saying? You say that you're an economist. How do you interpret?
Well, I think
that shortage?
Again, yeah, I think it's politics overruling economics. Unfortunately, I think listen, we have a history. We are an entrepreneurial nation. We are a pro-immigration nation. We're a nation of immigrants. It's true. But we've also had our battles along the way where we have not been at various times, you know, exactly friendly towards immigrants. So I think to the extent that we can talk about how immigrant workers, for example, new immigrants coming to this country who are willing to work, they're complementary to the people that are already here. So for the most part, overwhelmingly, I mean, it's not even close. They're not taking jobs from somebody else. They're adding to the economy. And that's the part I think that we economists fall down on, right? We have to tell people that additional producers, additional consumers, and additional entrepreneurs all lead to economic growth. It's not a case that the pie is only so big and we're going to divvy it up. So I think it's talking more about growth and how immigration can help.
But and finally, in the last minute that I have, I want you to go back to that line that you said that some people believe that new immigrants or newcomers are going to be taking jobs away from the Americans. Why isn't that true?
Because, as I said, what you see in the research and, you know, in terms of economics, straightforward, is that they come in and largely are doing work that other people aren't doing. Either they don't want to do it or we don't have enough people doing it. So again, in that filling those needs, those vacancies, that's why we say they're complementary workers. So therefore they're helping other people to be more productive. So it's a good news thing for everybody, but sometimes you'd never understand. Well, oftentimes you don't understand that listening to the politics of it. So again, I think if we can get back to understanding the role that immigrants have in the workforce and their role in entrepreneurship, I think we can make some great headway in getting to a more constructive immigration policy.
So I like this complementary workers.
Yes.
Something
That's what they do. Yeah.
Very good. Well, certainly, thank you for explaining that to us. So you're telling me that it's up to us, the public servants, the people that have been elected, the politicians, to learn and to explain to the rest of the American population that the immigrants are coming to give, not to take away.
Absolutely. And to the extent that we have political leaders that can do that, that's a huge plus to talk about, again, being a welcoming society and talking about how this is pro-growth and it's good for everybody.
Thank you. Yield back.
Gentle ladies, yields back. Thank you so very much to all the witnesses. And Mr. Keating, I didn't have time to ask you a question, but I really appreciate your answers to Ms. Salazar regarding immigration. I think this is a part of a discussion that needs to happen among members of Congress and approach this issue with the honesty that it requires. And with that, I want to thank all the witnesses for being here today. Your testimony is proof that even in the darkest of times, the spirit of America's entrepreneurs shines bright. The post-pandemic economy presents many opportunities and challenges for small business owners. At the Voice of Small Businesses in Washington, we must work as a committee to support these new business owners and help their firms flourish. These new businesses will be critical as we work toward full economic recovery and future growth. I look forward to working with committee members to ensure that small businesses have the resources they need to navigate this changing economy. I ask unanimous consent that the article and report by the Kaufman Foundation entitled America's New Business Plan is submitted for the record. With that, I will ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statement and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered. And if there is no further business to come before the committee, we are adjourned. Thank you.